Hello, I'm R.A. Spratt. I write and perform this podcast. If you'd like to support the show, I'm a children's author, so you can buy a book by me, or you can buy me a coffee by going to buymeacoffee.com/storiesrasprat. It's an easy way to make a small thank you gift to the show so I can keep kicking this can down the road. The podcast directory you're using right now should have a link to my Buy Me a Coffee page in the show notes, or you can type it into your browser. That's buymeacoffee.com/storiesrasprat. All contributions are gratefully appreciated. Hello and welcome to Bedtime Stories with me, R.A. Spratt. Today I'm recording this episode at the State Library of New South Wales in front of a live audience. Audience, make some noise so the people at home believe that you are alive. Well done. Last year on this podcast, we travelled with Odysseus on his journey home from Troy, and the scripts from those episodes have been made into a book, which will go on sale in June this year. So when my publishers found out I was doing this show, they begged me to do an episode about Greek mythology to try and encourage everyone to buy a copy of the book when it comes out. And I am scared of my publisher, so that is what we're going to do. We're going to go back to before the Odyssey, to the beginning of the Trojan War. Last week's episode was about Helen and how she kept getting kidnapped. So this week we're doing the next instalment, how the war actually began. Let's get into it. Today's story is Achilles and the Terrible Start. Derek, Samantha and Michael hurried home from school, partly because they wanted to hurry away from the building where they were forced to spend all day enduring horrible ordeals, such as learning maths, but mainly because they wanted to hurry home to their beloved Nanny, and more specifically, the afternoon tea she had made for them. Nanny Piggins was a great believer in forcing children to consume vast amounts of cake the moment they set foot through the door, to help them overcome the trauma of compulsory education. But the children were also eager to get back because Nanny Piggins had promised to tell them the story of the Trojan War. They knew it would be a good tale because the Trojan War took place in the ancient Greek mythology days, before children's literature had developed standards and was, therefore, way more weird and violent than stories authors are allowed to write today. "You're home," said Nanny Piggins. "Did the bus driver finally install the rockets I recommended?" "No, we just ran from the bus stop," said Michael, "because you promised to tell us the story of the Trojan War." "I did? Gosh, I'm a good nanny," said Nanny Piggins. "Well, you'd better tuck into some cake. You'll need it to sustain yourself to fathom such a bizarre tale." So Boris joined them at the kitchen table, and they shoved cake in their mouths, and Nanny Piggins began. Now, when you think of the Trojan War, you think of the ending. "Yeah, because it's famous," said Derek. "That's the bit with the Trojan horse." "Indeed," said Nanny Piggins. "Who would have thought that playing hide and seek inside a wooden farm animal would prove to be one of the greatest military strategies of all time?" So everyone knows about that bit, but very few people know how the war began, which is a shame because the beginning was every bit as cocoa bananas as the ending. "In what way?" asked Samantha. "Well, you know how Greek heroes pride themselves on being the heroiest heroes ever in history?" "Yeah, they're always the strongest and the bravest," said Michael. "And they're usually related to the Greek gods," added Derek. "Yes, well, at the beginning of the Trojan War, the heroes were not feeling very hero-y." "What do you mean?" asked Samantha. "Well, you remember that the Trojan War kicked off when Helen, the most beautiful woman in the entire world, was kidnapped," said Nanny Piggins. "And her husband, the king of Sparta, was caught by surprise. He thought Helen was kidnap-proof because he'd had all the heroes in Greece swear an oath not to kidnap her and to come together and go to war against anyone who did. But he totally forgot to allow for the fact that perhaps a non-Greek hero might kidnap her, someone who hadn't heard about this oath, which is, of course, exactly what happened. Paris, who was a shepherd / secret prince of Troy, ran off with his wife. The king of Sparta was understandably really, really upset. So straight away, he activated the oath. He sent messengers out to all the heroes in Greece, telling them to gather so they could meet up and sail off to bash up everybody in Troy. And get Helen back, added Samantha. Oh yes, that too, said Nanny Piggins. But straight away, the king's plan hit a snag, because all the superhero-y heroes were not feeling very heroic. They didn't want to go. But they swore an oath, said Michael. I know, said Nanny Piggins. But the thing about Greek heroes is they're complicated characters. And by complicated, I mean flawed. And by flawed, I mean sometimes their behaviour was just dreadful. When the heroes were summoned, they all came up with excuses. Odysseus pretended to be insane by sowing salt into his fields. Achilles' mother dressed him up as a girl and hid him in a castle with 50 princesses. And the king of Cyprus said, oh yeah, I'll send 50 ships. And then he sent one ship with 49 tiny model ships on board. That's not very heroic, said Derek. No, the problem was the oracles. Whoa. You see, they didn't have military strategists back in the ancient Greek story days. They just had oracles. What is an oracle? Asked Michael. Well, an oracle is kind of like Siri today. You know how some people ask their phone every random question that pops into their head? Things like, hey Siri, what's the weather today? And hey Siri, how do I get to the Slimbridge cake factory? And hey Siri, who invented the first chocolate bar? The children nodded. Well, there was no Siri in ancient Greece. Mobile phones had not been invented yet, but silly questions had. So Greek heroes had to put their silly questions to oracles. And oracles were people who made prophecies about the future. Oh, now what's a prophecy, said Michael. Well, today we would call a prophecy a guess, said Nanny Piggins. But the oracles said their guesses came from the gods, so people took them very seriously. And all the oracles in Greece were saying the same thing, that the Trojan War was going to last for 10 years. Now, none of the heroes wanted to go away for 10 years. They thought it'd be more sensible to stay home for the first 9 years and then just pop over to Troy for the last bit. When the king of Sparta found out that none of the heroes wanted to come, he was so angry he couldn't see straight. He sent Agamemnon, his brother, to go and round them all up. When finally they'd reluctantly all gathered at a beach at Aulis, the first thing Agamemnon did was give all the most famous heroes the most important jobs. That way they'd be less likely to run off. So he made Odysseus second in command, he made Nestor his chief advisor, and he made Achilles the admiral in charge of all the ships. Well, that makes sense, said Boris. Achilles was the most famous. He had a heel named after him. Yes, Achilles was famous and very good looking and incredibly talented at killing people. But at the beginning of the Trojan War, Achilles was only 15 years old. What? He wasn't even old enough to have a driver's license. I know, said Nanny Piggins, which is why it was so strange to put him in charge of 1,013 ships full of soldiers. But Achilles was a Greek hero and therefore completely deluded about his abilities. So he agreed to be an admiral despite knowing absolutely nothing about sailing, navigation, or how to be an admiral. And they all set off. Now, Troy is 600 kilometres from Greece, so the voyage only took 5 days. There were no storms, no monsters, no interventions from the gods, so the trip went unusually well by ancient Greek mythology standards. Achilles was feeling as overconfident as a 15-year-old working at McDonald's, thinking, how hard can it be to work the ice cream soft-serve machine? Just so you know, if you've never tried to work an ice cream soft-serve machine, the answer is very, very hard. And leading a navy is arguably even harder than operating a soft-serve machine. Anyway, everything was going incredibly well. The entire fleet of 1,013 ships landed safely on the beach. And Achilles was only 15 and therefore not a man of reflection. Well, he wasn't even a man yet. So he didn't pause to consider tactics or, heaven forbid, negotiate. No, Achilles simply gave the order, attack! And all 50,000 soldiers ran up the beach, waving their swords, looking for Trojans to kill, villages to burn, and a city to ransack. Now, meanwhile, in a kitchen in a palace just over the hill, a staggeringly beautiful queen had just put a chocolate souffle in the oven. When she heard the sounds of people screaming and swords clashing and men yelling really mean things at each other. Hang on, said Derek. A staggeringly beautiful queen who's good at baking cake? Was she perhaps a distant relative of yours? How did you guess? Asked Nanny Piggins. Just a hunch, said Derek. She was indeed. She was my great-great-great times 299 greats cousin, Telephus. Full name, Telephus Piggins, the queen of the Mycenaeans. Just to make sure we're imagining this properly, said Michael. So she was a pig, right? Indeed, said Nanny Piggins. You don't think a mere human would be capable of baking a chocolate souffle in a 4,000-year-old oven, do you? Of course not, said Michael. I don't know what I was thinking. But, said Samantha, if she was queen of the Mycenaeans, why was she there in Troy? She wasn't, said Nanny Piggins. The Greek army was not attacking Troy because Achilles had landed on the wrong beach. In fact, he'd landed in the wrong country. He was hundreds of kilometres off course, and he was inadvertently attacking the perfectly innocent cake-loving residents of Mycea. Achilles was so clueless about navigation, he had no idea of his dreadful mistake until he spotted my cousin sprinting down the beach towards him, wielding her wooden spoon and bellowing her war cry. I am so cross with you! Achilles was very surprised to see a deranged yet staggeringly beautiful pig storming over the sand dunes. Hey, isn't that staggeringly beautiful pig Queen Telephus? It does look like her, said Odysseus, but Telephus lives in Mycea. What's she doing here in Troy? Just then, thousands of soldiers streamed over the sand dunes behind her. And isn't that the Mycenaean army? What are they doing here? Asked Achilles. Odysseus began to get a nasty suspicion of just what might have happened. Achilles, you did read the map carefully, didn't you? Map, said Achilles. You can't have maps of the sea. They'd get wet. Yes, you can. They show where the currents and the islands and the shore is, said Odysseus. How did you find this location? Oh, said Achilles, I just told the men to put up the sails and then let the wind blow us here. I'm the son of a goddess and a king. They love me up on Mount Olympus. The gods wouldn't blow me to the wrong place. You haven't had much experience with the Greek gods, have you? Said Odysseus. At this point, Telephus had reached the first of the Greek soldiers and started brutally walloping about the head with her wooden spoon, stomping on their feet and biting their shins. It finally dawned on Achilles that he had made a terrible mistake. Everybody, back to the ships! Run! He cried. Normally, it's hard to get 50,000 soldiers to simultaneously spin around and go in the other direction, but seeing my cousin Telephus wild-eyed with rage and brandishing her wooden spoon was enough to convince them. The soldiers started fleeing. Achilles felt bad about leading an entire army to the wrong location, so he bravely stood his ground to make sure the men got away safely. As Telephus approached, Achilles blocked her path. Now, Telephus, it's me, Achilles. Could you please stop hitting my men? We just made a whoopsie. We're terribly sorry about it. We'll be on our way if you just stop hitting us long enough so we can get on our ships. Piffle to that, cried Telephus. It was too late for apologies. Her souffle would be totally ruined by the time she got back to the palace. Someone had to be punished. So she bopped Achilles on the head too. Oh dear, said Boris. Don't worry, it didn't hurt Achilles. He was wearing a helmet. Also, his mother had dipped him in the river Styx when he was a baby, so he was invulnerable to injury in every part of his body except his ankles. Which is why, children, if you ever do need to wallop an ancient Greek hero, make sure you mix in a few bashes to the ankles, just to be sure. The children nodded. This was good advice. But as her wooden spoon made contact with Achilles' helmet for the 57th time, Telephus tripped on a vine and stumbled into Achilles. He wasn't even looking. He was too busy holding his sword defensively, trying to protect his pretty face. And she stumbled into the blade. "Ooh!" cried Achilles. "You've got blood on my sword." "Ow!" cried Telephus, collapsing on the ground. "You've totally ruined my third favourite toga." "I'm so sorry," said Achilles. He was just a boy after all. Telephus did not accept the apology. She just bashed him about the knees instead. So Achilles had the good sense to use the opportunity of her writhing on the floor in agony to run away back to his ship. And that is how my cousin, Queen Telephus of Mysia, successfully drove off the entire Greek armada single-handedly, or to be strictly accurate, single wooden spoonedly. "Good for her," said Samantha. "So and then the Greek army sailed on to Troy," said Derek. "Oh no," said Nanny Piggins. "Their ships had been damaged in the battle, their men had been wounded, several people had had their feelings hurt. So they sailed all the way back to Greece to regroup and adjust their management structure." "What does that mean?" asked Michael. "Well, they couldn't sack Achilles for being totally incompetent because the oracles had said that he would be key to winning the war, but they could move him on to a new job." "What new job?" asked Samantha. "Agamemnon made Achilles general in charge of being handsome." "That makes sense," said Derek. Back in Mysia, things went back to normal. They fixed all the things the Greek soldiers had smashed and burned. Soon it was like the whole accidental invasion had never happened, except for the wound in Telephus's leg. It wouldn't heal. It turned a strange green, yellowy colour and got all gross and pussy. It even started to smell weird. It was almost as if the wound was cursed. So Telephus decided to seek medical advice. "From a doctor?" asked Michael. "No, they didn't have doctors back then," said Nanny Piggins. "She consulted an oracle." "Of course," said Derek. "And the oracle said that the wound could only be cured by the person who had inflicted it." "But it wasn't anyone's fault," said Samantha. "She tripped on a vine." But Achilles had been holding the sword, so Telephus took the omen to mean that it was referring to him and only he could cure her leg. So Telephus sailed over to Greece and found the Greek army, which didn't take her long because she knew how to read maps and follow directions. Telephus realised that the Greek army might hold a grudge against her because she had personally bashed so many of them about their head. So she approached the Greek camp in disguise, dressed as a beggar. Now, to be fair to the ancient Greek people, they were very good at offering hospitality to strangers. So Telephus was shown straight to the dining hall, where Agamemnon's wife, Princess Clytemnestra, who incidentally was Helen's sister, had just brought out a beautiful chocolate cake. Before anyone could stop her, Telephus snatched the cake from the princess's hands. "Do exactly as I say, or the cake gets it," said Telephus. "No, not the cake," said Agamemnon. "I spent all morning getting my slaves to bake that," protested Clytemnestra. "Couldn't you kill one of the men instead?" asked Odysseus. "Silence," ordered Telephus, ripping off her disguise. "For I am Telephus, queen of the Mysians, who you rudely invaded just last week, and I am really cross with you. I shall return this cake to you unharmed, but only if you bring forth Achilles, so that he may heal the leg which he has stabbed." She pulled up her skirt to show the horrible festering wound. "Oh, gross," said Agamemnon. "Quick, fetch Achilles before she makes us look at it again." Then, once my wound is healed, continued Telephus, if you promise not to hurt me, I shall personally lead your fleet to Troy, so you stop blundering about the Mediterranean, invading the wrong countries, and making everyone's life a misery. Deal, said Agamemnon, delighted to finally have a competent sailor on staff. So Achilles healed Telephus's leg. How did he do that? Asked Michael. Did the gods give him the power of antibiotic ointment? No, said Nanny Piggins. Achilles put a band-aid on the wound and kissed it better. And being a half god and a half king, that actually worked. And Telephus kept up her side of the bargain. Well, she didn't return the cake. She ate that. She was a Piggins after all. But she did take charge of the fleet. She trained all the soldiers, fixed all the ships, and most importantly, told all the captains exactly where to sail them. Then did they attack Troy? Asked Derek. No, said Nanny Piggins. What? Said Derek. Why not? Asked Samantha. Well, the Greek soldiers were all packed and ready to set sail, but the fleet couldn't go anywhere because there was no wind. Well, I give up, said Telephus. I can fix your ships, I can lead your men, I can guide your fleet, but I can't make the wind blow. Agamemnon was at his wits' end. By this stage, the 50,000 soldiers had been hanging around waiting to invade Troy for over a year. They were getting bored, and if they didn't attack someone soon, they were all going to sneak off back to their homes. Agamemnon needed a plan, so he did what all Greek heroes do in times of trouble. He consulted an oracle, guess Derek? Exactly, said Nanny Piggins. And, yeah, do you want to have an ooh there? Ooh. And the oracle said, to make the winds blow, you must make a sacrifice to the gods. Oh, okay, said Agamemnon. What would the gods like, do you think? Like many men, he wasn't good at gift shopping. You must sacrifice your daughter, the Princess Iphigenia. I can't do that, said Agamemnon. My wife would be so cross if I sacrificed our daughter. She'd never let me do it. Ah, then tell your wife she needs to bring the princess here so she can marry Achilles. Hey, said Achilles, I'm only 15. I'm too young to get married. Duh, said the oracle. It's a trick. You won't actually have to marry her. She will be sacrificed with a ceremonial sword and burned on a flaming pyre. Well, I may not want to get married, said Achilles, but I don't want you to set fire to my fiancé either. Achilles, why don't you go outside and play in the sand, said Agamemnon. Leave the talking to the grown-ups. But surely Agamemnon wouldn't kill his own child, exclaimed Samantha. What a meanie, said Boris. I know it sounds crazy, said Nanny Piggins, but the craziest thing was Princess Iphigenia was happy to go along with it. For the honour of Greece, we must win this war, Father, and we will never win if we don't get there in the first place. As such, I would be proud to be sacrificed to make this possible, to make the winds blow. Now, Agamemnon was a brilliant general, but probably not the world's best dad. So he said, okay, and got out his sword. Stop, cried Telephus. But we need to make the wind blow so we can invade Troy, complained Agamemnon. But the gods wouldn't want you to sacrifice your own child, said Telephus. They wouldn't, said Agamemnon. No, they'd much rather you gave them something nice, like a slice of cake. Telephus pointed to a delicious-looking chocolate cake that was sitting out on a cooling rack. But I was planning to have that for my dinner, said Agamemnon. Telephus realised there was no point trying to reason with him, so she stomped hard on his foot, snatched the cake, and drew her own sword. The second her blade sliced into that delicious, spongy, chocolatey goodness, the wind whipped up. It worked, cried Odysseus. The entire army cheered. Hooray! And Zeus himself reached down and took the cake and ate it. And finally, the Greek army set sail for Troy, and the Trojan War began. All thanks to my staggeringly beautiful cousin, Telephus Piggins, and her really gross leg wound. The end. Time for bed. Hello, it's me again. If you enjoyed listening to Bedtime Stories with R.A. Spratt, it would be really helpful if you could like, subscribe, follow, and or review the show on whatever podcast platform you're listening to now. Every little one of those digital affirmations helps, and the bigger this podcast gets, the more I can justify procrastinating from my real job to keep bringing these stories to you. Thank you.